Okay, so picture this. You wake up one morning, you glance at the calendar, and it's suddenly 1931. Not a different day, not a different month, but centuries ahead of what you thought it was. That's
Whoa.
exactly what happened in Turkey back
Wow.
in 1926 when Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the father of the Turks, decided to catapult his nation into the 20th century.
Uh,
Today, we're diving deep into the legacy of this complex figure, a man who was both liberator and reformer, hero and authoritarian.
What's captivating about Ataturk is that he embodies this fascinating paradox. He was a product of a dying empire, yet he had the vision and the audacity to forge a new nation from its ashes.
Right, and we have some incredible primary sources to guide us.
oh.
We have this exclusive interview Ataturk gave to an American journalist in 1923, right at the dawn of the Turkish Republic.
Okay.
And we'll also be drawing on historical accounts, personal stories of those who lived through this tumultuous era to really give you a sense of what it was like to be swept up in this whirlwind of change.
It's like having a front row seat to one of the most pivotal moments in modern history, and by exploring Ataturk through these three key lenses, the liberator, the founder, and the reformer, we'll gain a richer understanding of his impact, not just on Turkey, but on the world.
Absolutely. And if you enjoy uncovering these hidden stories behind history's most influential figures, be sure to hit that subscribe button
Yes.
so you don't miss out on future deep dives. Now let's start with Ataturk, the liberator.
Yeah.
To truly grasp his rise,
Okay.
we need to paint a picture of the world he inherited, the Ottoman Empire in the late 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't the sprawling mighty power it once was.
Right.
Instead, think internal strife, dwindling territories, and a desperate struggle to keep pace with these modernizing European nations.
Yeah, it was a powder keg waiting to explode.
Imagine an empire that had once spanned 3 continents, now shrinking, its grip on power weakening.
The Ottoman Empire was grappling with military defeats, a struggling economy, and a growing sense of nationalism amongst its diverse population. This tumultuous environment had a profound impact on shaping Ataturk's worldview.
Yeah.
He witnessed the empire's vulnerabilities firsthand and developed a steely determination to forge a new destiny for the Turkish people.
So into this volatile world enters a young Mustafa Kemal,
Right.
born in 1881 in the Ottoman city of Thessaloniki.
Okay.
From his youth, there were already glimmers of the revolutionary he would become, pushing against the currents of tradition. There's this telling anecdote about his education.
Yes, his mother envisioned a traditional religious education for him, something quite common for the time,
Right.
but young Mustafa Kemal yearned for a more modern, secular education. This early inclination towards progress and reason foreshadowed the radical reforms he would later champion.
It's amazing to think how such a seemingly small act of defiance, choosing one school over another, can sometimes foreshadow the path a person's life will take. It speaks to his independent spirit even at a young age. He ultimately chose a military career, and that's where his reputation as a brilliant strategist began to blossom. What can you tell us about the pivotal Battle of Gallipoli in 1915, the battle that really put him on the map?
Gallipoli was a watershed moment for Ataturk and for the course of World War I. He was tasked with defending the Gallipoli Peninsula against a massive Allied invasion.
Wow.
The odds were stacked against him, but through sheer tactical brilliance, he led his troops to victory, famously urging them to die defending their position.
Wow.
It's a stark command, but it reflects the desperate nature of the fight. This victory cemented his status as a national hero, earning him grudging respect even from his enemies.
It's incredible to think that this victory against British, French, and ANZAC forces is still so vividly remembered on both sides, even today. It truly showcased Ataturk's military genius.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just his strategic mind, it was also his undeniable charisma and his ability to inspire this unwavering loyalty in his troops. He was very conscious of his image,
Right.
cultivating a persona of strength and decisiveness. This carefully crafted public image would prove invaluable in the years to come as he navigated the treacherous landscape of a crumbling empire.
So we have this war hero emerging from the chaos, this brilliant military mind with a growing reputation. But how does that transition into becoming the founder of a new nation? That's where things get really interesting.
It's crucial to remember that Ataturk was a product of the Ottoman system.
Yeah.
He served it, he fought for it, but eventually he came to the difficult conclusion that it was beyond saving. That's where the complexity of his relationship with the empire comes into play, filled with contradictions and shifting loyalties.
It wasn't as if he initially set out to dismantle the Ottoman Empire, was it? He was part of a movement called the Young Turks, a group that aimed to reform and modernize the empire from within. So how did that evolve into the creation of a completely new nation?
The Young Turks were a group of reformers who, like Ataturk, were influenced by Western ideas
Okay.
and believed that the empire needed to embrace modernity to survive.
Okay.
They saw the writing on the wall, so to speak,
Right.
but their efforts were ultimately overtaken by the outbreak of World War I and the rising tensions within the empire itself.
And those tensions, as I understand it, revolved around the very definition of what it meant to be Turkish
Yeah.
in a vast multicultural empire.
Yeah.
This concept of a singular national identity clashed with the reality of the Ottoman Empire's diverse population, didn't it?
You hit the nail on the head. The decline of the Ottoman Empire coincided with the rise of nationalism throughout Europe and the Middle East. It was a potent ideology, this idea that a nation should be defined by shared language, culture, and ethnicity, and this idea was fundamentally at odds with the Ottoman reality of a multi-ethnic, multi-religious society. That clash set the stage for a period of immense upheaval and sadly unspeakable tragedy.
This is where the story takes a dark turn.
Mm.
We need to address the Armenian genocide, a horrific event that unfolded during this period. It's a sensitive and tragic chapter, but one that's absolutely essential to understanding the context of Ataturk's rise.
Absolutely. The Armenian genocide, beginning in 1915, was a systematic campaign of violence targeting the Armenian population within the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
Driven by fears of Armenian nationalism and the desire to create a more homogeneous Turkish nation-state, the Young Turk government orchestrated the mass killing and deportation of Armenians. It was a calculated act of ethnic cleansing.
We have access to harrowing accounts from survivors. Stories of church bells ringing out as warnings, children witnessing unspeakable acts of brutality, and the desperate cries of families being torn apart. These personal stories really drive home the human cost of this tragedy, the individual lives shattered amidst these larger political forces.
And it's crucial to understand where Ataturk stood during this period. While there's no evidence he was directly involved in the atrocities, he was a part of the Ottoman military.
Right.
Later, he would benefit from the elimination of a significant portion of the empire's diversity, a tragic reality that made his vision of a homogeneous Turkey easier to achieve.
It's important to acknowledge that the Turkish government, even today, continues to deny that the Armenian genocide was, in fact, a genocide. This denial adds yet another layer of complexity to Ataturk's legacy and the ongoing struggle for the victims to receive recognition and justice.
The legacy of the Armenian genocide continues to cast a long shadow over Turkish-Armenian relations and remains a source of tension and pain. The suppression of historical narratives, the refusal to acknowledge the truth only perpetuates the injustice. It's a wound that has yet to heal.
So we have Ataturk, the war hero, operating within a crumbling empire, grappling with these fundamental questions of national identity. And all around him, this horrific genocide is unfolding. How does he navigate this incredibly complex situation? We'll unpack that and delve deeper into his transformation from military leader to nation builder when we return for part 2 of our deep dive into the legacy of Ataturk.
As the dust settled from World War I and the Ottoman Empire teetered on the brink of collapse, Ataturk saw an opportunity.
Yeah.
Not just to salvage something from the wreckage, but to create a new Turkey, one free from the weight of its past and ready to stand as an equal among the modern nations of Europe.
It's a bold vision, especially considering the circumstances.
Yep.
The empire was in ruins, there were competing factions vying for power, and the victorious Allied powers were dictating terms. It sounds like an incredibly chaotic and dangerous time.
It absolutely was.
Wow.
But Ataturk, already a national hero thanks to his military triumphs, had this uncanny ability to navigate these treacherous waters. He rallied support both within Turkey and on the international stage,
Right.
presenting his vision for a new nation.
Okay.
Many saw him as a beacon of hope, a leader who could guide Turkey out of the ashes of the Ottoman Empire.
So how did he go about building this new nation? Where do you even begin after centuries of one form of rule?
Well, a pivotal turning point was the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923.
All right.
This wasn't just another treaty.
Right.
It officially dissolved the Ottoman Empire and recognized the Republic of Turkey. It was a symbolic and legal break from the past, paving the way for Ataturk to consolidate his power and begin implementing his ambitious reforms.
Ah, the reforms. We have to talk about those. Ataturk was clearly determined to transform Turkey into a modern, secular nation.
Right.
And he seemed to be in a hurry to sever ties with the past, going so far as to change the calendar itself. I mean, that's not something you hear about every day.
His reforms were indeed radical and sweeping.
Yeah.
He recognized that time was of the essence. Remember, he literally shifted Turkey from the Islamic Hijri calendar to the Gregorian calendar overnight,
Right.
essentially fast-forwarding time by 600 years.
Imagine waking up one morning and finding that the year had suddenly jumped 6 centuries ahead.
I know.
It must have felt like stepping into an alternate reality.
Yeah.
What was the reasoning behind such a drastic move?
Yeah.
Was it purely symbolic, or was there a deeper purpose?
It was certainly symbolic, a dramatic way to break from tradition and signal a new era,
Right.
but it was also more than that. By adopting the Gregorian calendar, which was widely used in Europe, Ataturk aimed to align Turkey with the West and distance it from its Ottoman past. It was a powerful statement about the direction he wanted to take the nation.
It's fascinating how even something as seemingly mundane as a calendar can become a tool for social and political change. It really highlights the depth of Ataturk's vision and his willingness to challenge deeply ingrained norms.
And the calendar was just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Ataturk implemented a series of reforms that touched nearly every aspect of Turkish life. He abolished the caliphate, which represented the spiritual leadership of the Islamic world. He removed Islam as the state religion and introduced secular laws. He completely overhauled the education system and granted women the right to vote and hold political office.
These are incredibly progressive reforms, especially for the time period and for a region that was largely traditional and conservative. I can only imagine the shockwaves these changes sent through Turkish society.
Yes.
How were these reforms received by the people? Was there resistance?
There was certainly resistance,
Right.
particularly from those who clung to traditional religious beliefs and saw Ataturk's reforms as an attack on their faith and way of life.
Right.
It was a period of great upheaval and societal transformation.
Yeah.
And not everyone welcomed the changes with open arms.
It sounds like a collision between two different worlds.
Yes.
Two different visions for Turkey's future.
Right.
On one side, you have Ataturk, the champion of progress and secularism, and on the other, those who saw his reforms as a threat to their deeply held values.
Exactly.
How did Ataturk handle this opposition?
He faced opposition from various groups, including religious conservatives, Kurdish nationalists, and even some within his own party who questioned the pace and scope of his reforms.
Wow.
He was determined to see his vision through,
Okay.
and he wasn't afraid to use authoritarian methods to quell dissent and consolidate his power.
That's a crucial point, isn't it? While he was undoubtedly a champion of progress and modernization,
Yes.
he also exhibited a strong authoritarian streak.
He did.
He was willing to silence those who dared to challenge his authority. How do we reconcile those two seemingly contradictory aspects of his character?
It's a reminder that historical figures are rarely black and white.
Right.
They're products of their time and circumstances, often driven by a complex mix of motivations and beliefs. In Ataturk's case, it seems that his unwavering belief in the need for a strong, unified Turkey capable of competing on the world stage outweighed any concerns he may have had about using heavy-handed tactics to achieve his goals.
It's a fascinating dilemma.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have these remarkable reforms pushing Turkey towards modernity and equality.
Right.
But on the other, you have this suppression of dissent,
Yes.
a curtailing of individual freedoms in the name of progress. It makes you wonder, was it possible for Ataturk to achieve his vision without resorting to such authoritarian measures?
That's a question historians continue to debate.
Yeah.
It's important to consider the context. The collapse of an empire, the rise of nationalism, the threat of foreign intervention. Ataturk felt a tremendous urgency to create a strong, stable Turkey, and he believed that drastic measures were necessary to achieve that goal.
So he was willing to make tough choices, even unpopular ones, to secure what he saw as the best possible future for his nation. Another example of this, and one that really struck me, was his decision to reform the Turkish language, switching from the Arabic script to a Latin-based alphabet.
That was a truly radical move,
Right.
a cultural earthquake that impacted every aspect of Turkish life.
Wow.
Imagine the sheer logistical challenge of changing the way an entire nation reads and writes.
That's hard to imagine.
It essentially cut off an entire generation from its own literary and historical heritage,
Hmm.
making it difficult for them to access texts written in the old script.
It must have felt like a complete cultural rupture,
Yes.
a severing of ties with the past.
It did for many.
What was the rationale behind such a dramatic shift?
Ataturk believed that the Arabic script,
Okay,
associated with the Ottoman era and Islamic tradition,
all right.
was holding Turkey back from embracing modernity and aligning itself with the West. He saw the Latin alphabet, used by many European nations, as a symbol of progress and a key to integrating Turkey into the modern world.
It's a powerful example of how language can be used as a tool for nation building, reshaping not just how people communicate, but also how they perceive their own identity and their place in the world.
Precisely. It
Yeah.
was a bold move, one that had far-reaching consequences, both positive and negative.
Right.
It fostered literacy and facilitated communication with Europe, but it also created a sense of discontinuity with the past.
So we see this pattern emerging. Bold decisions, a willingness to disrupt the status quo, a relentless pursuit of progress, even at a cost. It makes you wonder, what was the end goal? What kind of Turkey was Ataturk ultimately striving to create?
Ataturk envisioned a Turkey that was modern, secular, and firmly rooted in European ideals.
Yeah.
He wanted to shed the perceived backwardness of the Ottoman past and establish a nation that could stand as an equal among the world's powers.
So he was essentially redefining what it meant to be Turkish, shifting the national identity away from its Ottoman and Islamic roots towards a more Western, secular model. Did he succeed? Did he achieve this ambitious vision?
That's the question we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. We'll examine the lasting impact of Ataturk's reforms, the complexities of his legacy, and how his vision continues to shape Turkey today.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the legacy of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. We've traced his journey from brilliant military strategist to the architect of a new Turkey, a nation forged from the remnants of a crumbling empire. But revolutions, even those driven by the best intentions, always have a cost. So today we'll grapple with the complexities of Ataturk's legacy and how his vision continues to shape Turkey today.
It's remarkable how one man, in a relatively short period, could have such a profound and lasting impact on an entire nation. He really did reshape the very fabric of Turkish society. But, as we've discussed, his methods weren't without controversy. He often ruled with an iron fist, suppressing dissent in the name of progress. So how did those competing aspects of his legacy play out in modern-day Turkey?
It's fascinating to consider that even today, decades after his death, Ataturk's presence is still felt so strongly in Turkey. You see his image everywhere, on currency, in statues, in portraits displayed in government buildings and schools. He's still very much a part of the national consciousness, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. He's revered as the father of the Turks, a symbol of national pride, and the founder of the modern Turkish state. His vision of a secular, westernized Turkey remains deeply ingrained in certain segments of society, particularly among the military and political elite who see themselves as the guardians of his principles.
But there's also a growing segment of Turkish society that's pushing back against some of Ataturk's core principles, right? Especially his strict separation of religion and state.
That's right. While Ataturk is still a towering figure in Turkish history, there are those who criticize his authoritarian methods, his suppression of dissent, and his efforts to impose a singular Turkish identity on a diverse population. They argue that his vision of a homogeneous Turkish nation came at the expense of minority groups, like the Kurds, who faced persecution and cultural suppression.
And we can't forget the shadow of the Armenian genocide, a wound that continues to fester in the Turkish national psyche. It's difficult to have a nuanced conversation about Ataturk's legacy without acknowledging the devastating impact of that event and the Turkish government's continued denial of its full scope.
The Armenian genocide is a stark reminder that the creation of national identities, even when striving for noble goals, can sometimes be intertwined with acts of exclusion and violence. It raises difficult questions about the very nature of nation building and the choices leaders make when confronted with complex social and political realities.
It seems that Turkey is wrestling with those very questions today as it tries to reconcile Ataturk's vision of a secular, westernized nation with the aspirations of a more religiously and culturally conservative population. It's as if the country is undergoing a kind of national identity crisis, trying to define what it means to be Turkish in the 21st century.
You've hit upon a key tension in contemporary Turkish society. On the one hand, there's a deep respect for Ataturk's achievements and his role in establishing a modern, independent Turkey. On the other hand, There is a growing desire to reclaim aspects of Turkish identity that were suppressed or marginalized during Ataturk's era, including a greater embrace of Islamic traditions and a more inclusive approach to cultural diversity.
It's fascinating to see how Ataturk's legacy is being reinterpreted and debated in light of these contemporary challenges. It's a testament to the fact that history isn't static. It's a living, evolving narrative that we constantly reinterpret through the lens of our current experiences.
Exactly. And it's not just within Turkey that Ataturk's legacy continues to resonate. He became a model for leaders in other countries, particularly those emerging from colonialism, who saw him as a symbol of resistance against European powers and a champion of self-determination.
It's almost ironic that even Hitler admired Ataturk, albeit for very different reasons. It just goes to show that historical figures can inspire vastly different interpretations and be appropriated for agendas that they themselves might have abhorred.
That's the danger of simplifying history, reducing complex figures to heroes or villains. Ataturk, like all leaders, was a product of his time, driven by a mix of noble aspirations and pragmatic calculations. His legacy, like the man himself, is a tapestry of triumphs and contradictions.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the life and legacy of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, what do you think are the most important takeaways for us today? What lessons can we glean from his story, both positive and cautionary?
I think the most enduring lesson is that the pursuit of national unity and progress, while noble in its aims, often requires making difficult and sometimes morally ambiguous choices. Ataturk's story reminds us that even the most well-intentioned leaders can make mistakes, that their actions can have unintended consequences, and that the process of nation building is rarely a neat or straightforward affair.
It's a sobering reminder that history is rarely black and white. It's filled with shades of gray, and understanding those nuances is essential if we're to learn from the past and navigate the complexities of the present. Ataturk's legacy, with all its triumphs and tragedies, is a powerful reminder that progress is often a messy, unpredictable, and multifaceted process. And it compels us to ask ourselves, what price are we willing to pay for the future we envision? What compromises are we willing to make? And who ultimately benefits and who bears the cost of those decisions? These are the questions that Ataturk's story leaves us pondering. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating and complex world of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. We hope you've gained a richer understanding of this pivotal figure and the enduring impact his legacy continues to have on Turkey and the world. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more explorations of history's most compelling stories.